From news and views, issues and opportunities, we'll have in-depth conversations with decision makers to find out what they know and what they think. I'm Rico Hizon, inviting you to join the exchange because your business is our business.
Si Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ay taimtim na nanunumpa.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. faces an economy that has yet to bounce back from the crippling impact of the pandemic, and now suffering further from a fuel and food crisis. The nation awaits directions from the new leader and his economic team to ease the burden of our kababayans. Affordable prices and sustainable jobs. And how can the government work with producers in bringing food on the table? The potential of agribusiness in our C-suite vision.
Newly installed President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. reiterated calls for unity in his inaugural address as he focused on the challenges of the economy, promising to present an all-inclusive plan. What can our kababayans expect from a Marcos-managed economy? Let's now have an exchange with Ibon Foundation Executive Director, Sunny Africa. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us. Before we start our interview, let's listen to President Marcos on how he wants to tackle the economic challenges amid the pandemic and the conflict in Eastern Europe.
We are presently drawing up a comprehensive, all-inclusive plan for economic transformation. We will build back better by doing things in the light of the experiences that we have had, both good and bad.
From your standpoint, does the President give us a clear view of what he wants to achieve to return economic prosperity for our kababayan, Sunny?
We were actually surprised by the inaugural address, which gave disproportionate attention to feel-good statements as opposed to acknowledging how bad things are. So we don't think he gave enough attention to the very serious social and economic problems we're facing. And unfortunately, much more do we think that he established any new directions to fix, some really bad economic problems from an old way of thinking about the economy.
But didn't we not expect too much from his inaugural address? It's an inaugural address. It's his first day in office, boosting the confidence of our kababayans that he will do whatever he can to improve the economic conditions of our kababayans. Shouldn't we give him more time before we critique him?
No excuses from me.
I think anyone who has the ambition to become the president should be preparing long in advance. We think it's unfair to the Philippines and to the need to fix our problems to just think about the problems once you're elected. We think any serious candidate should have long ago thought about our problems, thought deeply about them, and then just sort of fine-tune things with who the economic team is and how they're going to be messaging it once they do get elected. So we do disagree that you only think about these things once you're elected. We think a really responsible presidential candidate, especially one who had so much momentum months into the coming to the election period, should have actually prepared long ago. We don't think we deserve this kind of cramming for fixing the huge problems we do.
All right, let's look ahead, Sunny. Instead of looking back. It is President Marcos' first day in office. What should be the priorities of his economic team led by Finance Secretary Ben Jokno on jump-starting the economy and creating new jobs for millions of our kababayans who are still jobless or underemployed?
Well, top of mind, I think, is exactly that. We have to spur aggregate demand by putting more money in people's pockets. We're a consumption-driven economy. our small businesses won't have an incentive to invest in their own businesses if they don't think the demand is there. So I think top priority should be increasing aggregate demand by putting more money into people's pockets, ensuring there's a supply response by supporting small businesses. And I think that can be done quite easy in the first 100 days. The new budget is coming up. It shouldn't be an austerity budget. It should be a bold, ambitious budget to spur aggregate demand, spur economic growth, spur revenue generation to repay our debt, and really get the economy off the running start. And that can be done, I think, very easily in the next 2 months before the budget
But
season
how can you have
starts.
increasing aggregate demand, putting more money into our kababayans' pockets when we're seeing a depressed peso against the US dollar, rising debt, and rising fuel and consumer prices?
Well, I think the fiscal straitjacket in a lot of ways is a constraint that can be overcome. If the administration is going to be relying on consumption taxes to increase revenues, that is going to be a dead end because there's just so much you can squeeze from Filipinos who are losing their jobs, losing incomes, losing livelihoods. If they retool their tax policies to actually tax those with the ability to pay more, meaning the few thousand billionaires the country has, also meaning the few large corporations who have been able to survive the pandemic and the lockdowns. I think a more progressive tax system, incoming President Marcos, can actually use what he claims to be the biggest electoral mandate, huge political capital. I think that is a huge lever that can be used for a more progressive tax system if he chose to. And if you generate revenues that way, that will free up resources for social spending, that will free up resources for economic services, that will free up resources for a bold fiscal stimulus that I think a lot of people have been looking for the last 2
But
years.
will the
That,
rich,
in all
will the
honesty,
rich
have
agree
not
to this
been getting.
progressive tax system, taxing them much higher than the usual rate? Because, as they say, they're also supporting the economy.
And they can support the economy much more by sharing a bit more of their concentrated wealth. We're only talking about the top 3,000 Filipinos, richest Filipinos. There are only about 3,000 billionaires in the country. We're only asking for a 1%, 2%, 3% incremental tax on their wealth over 123 billion pesos. At most, even for the richest Filipinos, that's not even a 6% tax on their wealth. So I think, will they do it? Well, they may not do it willingly, but we do want to start from the thinking that if President Marcos claims to have the largest electoral mandate in Philippine history, that is huge political capital to actually push the tax reforms needed to raise revenues in a progressive, sustainable, and we do believe just manner.
I see your point,
so
Sunny,
sorry.
but will it also
Sorry,
help
yeah.
in servicing? Will it go a long way in servicing our massive mountain of debt of close to 13 trillion pesos?
Well, the best way to service the debt is really to keep the economy growing. But if we don't spur aggregate demand, we won't get the economy growing. Secondly, we do have to raise revenues. Every government has to do that in a sustainable manner. And we do think it is unconscionable that there is an increasing concentration of wealth in a few while taxes on them are being cut. I mean, we can't be saying that, oh no, we don't have the resources, when there's really a huge stash of wealth there that is waiting to be used, that the government can use productively. If it's a matter of resistance, well, we say, let's appeal to our innate patriotism, our innate nationalism, our innate belief in wanting to help people. Unity is a good message. The way to actually unite is to unite to help sort the problems out with what resources we do have. And I think the billionaires have more than enough resources to contribute much more to expanding our fiscal space.
Thank you so much, Sunny, for this economic outlook exchange. Ibon Foundation's Sunny Africa. Here now is a rundown of this week's top business stories. Fitch Solutions expects the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to hike its policy rate to 3.25% by the end of the year, and that is higher than a previous forecast of 2.75%. The central bank has already raised borrowing costs by 0.5% to stifle rising prices. The government wants to borrow nearly 17 billion pesos for the rehabilitation of the Agus Pulangi power plants in Mindanao as it expedites the country's shift to clean energy resources. And the Manny Pangilinan-led Metro Pacific Investments acquires a controlling stake in Carmen's Best Ice Cream for around 200 million pesos. Coming up on The Exchange, where your business is our business. How can the Marcos administration keep the skies clear for the tourism industry despite air pockets on the horizon? The president of the Philippine Tour Operators Association joins us next. And Marcos Jr. vows to push for his food sufficiency. We'll get the views of the president of the Philippine Chamber of Agriculture and Food. Keep it right here on CNN Philippines. News you can trust. Glad you're staying with us right here on The Exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Data from the Tourism Department reveals domestic tourism increased by more than 30% last year as the industry picked up the pieces from the COVID-19 pandemic. How can the Marcos administration sustain these gains amid increasing COVID cases and rising fuel prices? And how can the country further reopen to the rest of the world? Joining us now is the president of the Philippine Tour Operators Association, Fe Abling Yu. Fe, thank you so much for joining us. Before I ask you the first question, let's listen in to President Marcos and what he said about the tourism sector.
The recovery of Philippine tourism, with its emphasis on accessing nature's beauty, I am sure will exceed expectations.
So, what are your expectations now from this Marcos administration on how he can further boost tourism, Fe?
Siguro, to further boost the tourism, especially the domestic tourism, ipagpatuloy siguro para maging safe ang lahat. Ipagpatuloy yung boosting ng ating mga kababayan, particularly from the tourism sectors, para maging safe. Kasi ngayon, open na tayo. Pero kahit sana open tayo, wag nating kalimutan yung mga safety protocols na dapat in place para magpatuloy na yung ating sinisimulan ngayon na maganda.
Totoo yun, no? Importante talaga that we keep not only our kababayans but also our international travelers safe in our own country. How would you assess, Fe, ang sitwasyon ngayon sa tourism industry? More than 2 years into the pandemic, alam natin, marami na rin pumapasok dito na mga tourists, di ba? At saka yung ating mga kababayan, nagta-travel sila in many tourism spots around the country. Pero is this generating more jobs in the tourism sector?
Well, from prior to pandemic naman talaga, Rico, ang tourism really generates more job sa ating ekonomiya, 'di ba? Ngayon na bumabalik na tayo, kasi ang isang turista pwedeng magbigay ng napakaraming trabaho, hindi lamang sa iisang establishmento, pero connect kasi multiplier effect kasi ang isang turista sa lahat ng establishmento. So, ngayon na unti-unti na siya bumabalik, unti-unti na rin talaga tayong yung employment generation, nare-realize na rin natin unti-unti. In fact, nagkakaroon tayo ngayon ng shortage sa mga empleyado. Kasi during the pandemic, palibhasa walang naging trabaho, they shifted to another industry na nagustuhan na nila, na ngayon ako speaking for myself and kulang na rin kami ng aming staff, na nagiging understaffed na ang mga hotels, resorts, airlines for that matter. Pero ngayon talaga, we call it revenge tourism siguro, Rico. Lahat ngayon gustong lumabas. Lahat ngayon gustong gumastos. Ngayon hindi na iniisip magkano.
Ganun
ano
ba?
ang kakainin ko. Ngayon hindi na Lahat gusto ng ma-experience. Lahat gusto nang tumira sa maayos na resort, pumunta sa magagandang destinasyon.
So, Fe, hindi nila iniisip yung pagtaas ng mga bilihin, ang pagtaas ng crudo, mas mahal ngayon para pumunta sa iba't ibang mga lugar dito sa ating bansa. At umaakyat na rin mga airfares kahit na may mga special fares ang ating mga airline companies, umaakyat yung surcharge.
At ang maganda dyan, Rico, admittedly, tumataas ang ating mga jet fuels, which is component ng isang paglalakbay. However, from the hotel side, from the resort side, nagiging very cooperative sila to make the package still affordable to the traveling public. Nagkakaroon ng nagkakaroon ng pagkakaunawaan, nagkakaroon ng pagkakaisa para mapalago at mapausbong masyado yung ating domestic tourism for now.
Alright, maraming ginawa.
Yung iba,
maraming ginawa ang ating dating tourism secretary na si Berna Romulo Puyat. Anong expectations ngayon ninyo sa bagong tourism secretary na si Cristina Frasco? Anong hinihingi nyo sa kanila? Especially from the tour operators?
Well, kami from the Philippine Tour Operators Association, lahat ng proyekto na gagawin ni Secretary Frasco, knowing that she came from a local government unit, an LGU. Ngayon, yung napanood ko po, sir, yung kanyang press con the other day, na gusto niyang magkaroon ng focus sa mga local government units. Ito naman po talaga, sir, ang aming kapartner sa isang pakete. Kasi napakahalaga po ng role ng LGU sa isang destinasyon. Ang pag-control po ng LGU, ito po kasi yung gustong i-improve ni Secretary na yung mga LGU magkaroon ng active participation sa ating mga tourist destination at kung ano pa po yung mga connectivity, kung ano pa po yung mga infrastructure na dapat i-in place, and yun po yung gusto ni Secretary Frasco na gusto rin po namin sana siyang suportahan dito. Kami po ay malugod na susuporta sa anuman pong proyekto na gagawin ni Secretary Frasco para po sa ikauunlad ng ating turismo dito sa Pilipinas.
Yan ang pinaka-importante, ang unlad ng ating Philippine tourism industry. Maraming salamat, Fe, for joining us for this Tourism Outlook Exchange, Philippine Tour Operators Association, Fe, abling you. And when we come back on the exchange, where your business is our business, the notion of 3 meals a day remains out of reach for many Filipinos. What can the private sector and the new government do to increase food security? We speak to the Philippine Chamber of Agriculture and Food straight ahead, right here on CNN Philippines, news you can trust. Glad you're staying with us right here on The Exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. As the new administration begins its first day in office, the food industry grapples with issues like rising prices of key ingredients and fuel. How can the private sector and this administration go hand in hand in keeping food costs low for every Filipino? Let's now have an exchange with the Philippine Chamber of Agriculture and Food President Danilo Fausto. Mr. Fausto, thank you so much for joining us. Before we start our interview, let's listen to President Marcos and his views of food self-sufficiency and agriculture.
Food sufficiency must get the preferential treatment the richest free trade countries always gave their agricultural sectors. Their policy boils down to don't do as we do. Do what we tell you to.
Food is so important to every Filipino and for any human being, Mr. Fausto. And now, the President is taking responsibilities, taking the so-called bull by the horns, no? He's also the Agriculture Secretary. What in his powers can he attain for food self-sufficiency for our kababayans?
Well, there's so many interlocking aspects that has to be done to be able to boost production and increase the food sufficiency and be able to achieve that. And as you see, out of the 1.8 trillion output of agriculture, more than 95% are coming from the private sector. So we really have to increase and encourage the investment of the private sector and expand further so that they can produce more. And no, we are now settled with the Russia-Ukraine war that has supply chain disruptions and availability of raw materials, and also COVID and also climate change. So these are all being faced by the new administration.
We have
But
a lot
most
of
importantly-
problems that the agricultural sector faces. So what key programs and initiatives must President Marcos undertake in his first 100 days to boost agricultural production and, for him to spur the private sector to make more investments?
Well, the first one of which is to rationalize importation. We have to import what is really what is needed, not import more than what is needed, and be able to prevent cheap subsidized imports competing with our local producers, because that will discourage them from producing more. It has to be a profitable business, and we have to give the private sector access to credit. And we are a little worried because the pronouncement of Secretary Jacno is that the priority will be infrastructure, education, and health. And there's no priority for food. We appeal to him to include food production as one, because he is in control of several agencies in government that can accelerate the access to credit. The Philippine Guarantee Corporation, the Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation. He is in charge of the Coconut Levy Fund. He is in charge of the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, the tobacco excise tax. These are things that can be mobilized, because right now, the treasury is empty. As reported by Secretary Abisado, in April, 85% of the 2025 budget has already been obligated and released. If you include May and June, so we will assume that the treasury is empty.
So
and
Mr.
now,
Fausto,
the people will be asking.
So, Mr. Fausto, with the president now taking the helm of the agriculture portfolio, this will be a priority over build, over infrastructure to be able to boost food self-sufficiency for the Filipino people, don't you think?
That's why, if it is not the president who is the secretary, then we will be in trouble. That's why we are very, very happy that the president will be the secretary, and we will be, all of us will be behind him and put up this task of producing food for our people. Because how can you have education and health if your people are hungry and starving?
So what should be President Marcos's first executive order for the agricultural industry?
We have to mobilize the funds. For the past 100 days, walang pera. The treasury is empty. We can securitize what is the future, because if you took, all of us are singing the same tune. Increase the budget of DA for 2023, but that will be next year. The problem is this year, this coming holiday season, where will be the food? We are now in Nueva Ecija already planting. We have finished our seedlings, and we have now transplanted. We are now applying fertilizer, and fertilizer has increased 300%. We need to subsidize fertilizer, bring down the cost of inputs of producing rice. And also, if it's possible, let's have a three cropping season. If there's a three cropping season, then the problem of sufficiency is over. And also use the high yielding variety of rice. So for corn, let's provide them with there's so many in all aspects of the agricultural sector: fish, aquaculture, corn.
So,
chicken,
Mr. Fausto, if we're running out of funds, how can we mobilize the funds? Where will the money be coming from? We have to borrow more money.
Well, there's such a thing as you securitize what is in the future. That can be done. The PhilRice and PhilMec are all subsidiary corporations, and that can be done. We can upfront the provision for post-harvest facilities in order to increase earnings for the farmers and encourage them to plant more. Have triple cropping by synchronizing irrigation and water availability for or small irrigation. That can be done. Bring in consolidation to get a Bureau of Agricultural Cooperatives inside the Department of Agriculture, so that we can consolidate and cluster these farmers to have economies of scale. These are things that are we're singing the same tune. But most of all, let's put in let's put a rationalization for importation. Let's have our food production here, because right now several countries have stopped exporting their products because they are protecting their own country, their own people, for their own country. If we do not do it now, we are on our own, and we have to do it as soon as possible. We cannot wait for next year. For the next 6 months, the people will be looking for performance from the president. And then we have to do it immediately. And we have to help the president. And we are ready to help him. It has to be a synchronized. We have problem of water availability to make sure that plant is fertilizer and seeds. That's for the crops. For the aquaculture and fingerlings is important. We are importing 50% of our milkfish fingerlings from Indonesia. We can produce it in Ilocos region, perhaps. This fingers over the backyard thing. We'll bring down the cost of fingerlings. And then there's no more commercial fishing. We can have a mariculture park.
Innovative initiatives indeed for food sufficiency. Thank you so much for this exchange. Philippine Chamber of Agriculture and Food, President Danilo Fausto. And this is the exchange who makes sense of the facts and the figures and the ups and downs of the business cycle, because your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Thanks for watching CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust.